Hello everyone, my name is Javier Medina, member of the UDS technical team, and in this video we're going to see how to install, configure and deploy a fully operational UDS Enterprise environment. To do this, we must have access to a serial number and access to the downloads for the corresponding version in order to download and import the appliances. In my case, I have a Proxmox platform, so I'm going to install the appliances related to Proxmox. It is worth noting that the database appliance is an appliance we provide as an example to facilitate the deployment of UDS, but if you have a database appliance based on MySQL, you can use it without any problem. Perfect. Now that all of this has been explained, let's move on to importing the appliances. In this case, the first one will be the database. So we will select Create VM and give the machine a name. In this case, it will be called UDS Database. We will place it in the video resource pool in this case, since I have a resource pool specifically dedicated to videos, and we will move on to the next step, which is the OS. Since we are not going to use any type of ISO image, we will select the option Do Not Use Any Media. We will click on System, and in System we will leave all options by default. We will click on the next option, and in the disk section you can decide the disk size, which won't matter in this case because the size given to this disk will be replaced later. It is worth noting that in the new versions of Proxmox 7.1 and later, there is a new tab called Disk that we can see it right here, where we can add or delete the disk that the machine will use. In this case, we can delete all disks, since the one that will be used is the one we import into the machine later. In my case, I'm not going to do it now, since this process can be done later, but just so you know, this way of doing exists. Now we will move to CPU, and in CPU you will allocate the necessary virtual CPUs that in this case at least 2 are required. We will move to the memory tab, and in memory we will specify the RAM that the machine will have. In this case, I'm going to allocate 4 GB. Now we will move to network, where you can select the type of network adapter. In this case, I'm going to select the LAN adapter. Then we will click on Confirm, where you can see a summary of the data selected in the previous sections. It is worth noting that you should not select the Start After Created option. And once all data is verified, we will click on Finish. And here we can see how the machine has been created. Now we will access the machine, go to the hardware section and select the hard drive. Now we will choose the detach option to remove the disk generated earlier. We click on Yes, and once the disk is detached, we will select it and click on Remove. Perfect. Once the disk is deleted, we will access the Proxmox terminal to insert the UDS database image. So first of all, we will download the database appliance using wget and the following link. It is worth emphasizing that to obtain the links for the respective appliances, we must go to the following URL when we can choose the platform on which we want to import appliances. In my case, I will choose Proxmox, and once inside, as you can see the different UDS appliances in their respective formats. To get the link for each appliance, we just right-click on the one we want, for example the database one, and select the Copy Link Address option. Once downloaded, we will decompress it with unzip and the package we already downloaded. Well, now to import the image into Proxmox, you must type the following command, which is qm import disk, the machine ID, that in my case it is 104, as we can see it right here, the path of the QCOW2 disk, and the Proxmox data store, which in my case is local. So once ready, we hit enter, and as we can see right here, you will notice that it has added a new disk. Now what we need to do with this new disk is click on Edit, and we must ensure that in the bus section, the ID section is selected. So we are going to modify it and click Add. Next, in the Options section, we will select Boot Order, click Edit, select the image we imported earlier, and set it to be in first place. We click OK, and once this step is completed, we can start the machine. Let's start it as an example so you can see, and the database machine will have boot up correctly. Now that we have seen the import process with the database, we are going to import the server and the tunnel. Once we have the 3 appliances imported, we are going to start configuring them. We will go in order, first the database, then the server, and then the tunnel. So we are going to access the database console, and we will log in with root and UDS. And well, as you can see, we will be able to observe certain information about the appliance. If we want to configure or manage this appliance, we can also do it through its cockpit, which will be by entering the IP address and the port 9090, as we can see down here. This way, we will be able to access cockpit to manage or configure this appliance. To access the cockpit, as we said, we will open a new tab and enter the appliance IP and the port 9090. And as we can see right here, this way we can access cockpit to manage or configure this appliance. Now we will return to the appliance console, and what we will do is modify the appliance IP, since it's currently getting an IP via DHCP. But if we want to have a different IP, we are going to modify the -etc network interfaces file. So once inside, we will select the network adapter we have and change it to static. We will add an IP address, which in this case will be the following. Along with a network mask and a gateway. So once ready, we will save the changes and we must restart the machine. As we can see, the IP has changed, and to access the cockpit, we can log in with the new IP we specified. And if you want, just to test, we will open a new tab, enter the new IP with the port 9090. And here we have the cockpit of the machine. Perfect. Let's go back to the database console again, and what we will do is turn on a new appliance, which is the UDS server. And just an important note, we must turn on this server appliance with the database already started. So well, as you can see right now, the appliances will get an IP through DHCP, and if there is no DHCP, we will have to do it manually. In my case, as you can see, I am getting an IP via DHCP, but I'm going to set it manually. So we are going to clear the terminal with clear, and we are going to run the following command, which is UDS IP set, and we will display the help menu. With the help menu, we can see the steps required for the command to specify a static IP. So I'm going to launch the command UDS IP set. The IP we want, in this case, it will be this, with mask 20. Gateway will be this one. And the hostname, that in my case will be server 40, for example. And if we have a DNS, we can specify it with --DNS and the DNS. So once everything is correct, we will hit on enter, and as we can see, the network configuration will change, and it is recommended to restart the appliance. So we are going to restart the appliance with a reboot and wait for it to restart. And as we can see in the initial configuration, the IP has changed to the one we defined. So now we are indeed going to configure this appliance through its web configurator. We will open a new tab, type HTTPS, the server IP, with the port 9900. And once inside, we will select the language we want. In this case, it will be English. Click on next, next, next. And in the network configuration, we will see the configuration we had already specified. So we will click here and select skip network. And we will click on next. In the next tab, it will ask for the server setup code, which we have right here. We will go to the server console, and it is the following code. So once entered, we will click on next. In the next window, we can specify the keyboard layout for our console. In this case, I'm going to select Spanish, as I live in Madrid. And I'm going to enter the Madrid time zone. If you have an NTP server, you could also specify it in the next section. So once finished, we will click on next, and here we will enter the database IP, which in our case is this one right here. And in our appliance, there is already a configured username UDS with the password UDS, and there is also an instance in that database also named UDS. So once this data is entered, we will click on next and wait for the database to be configured. Well, in this part, we will move on to activating our serial number, and we can do it in two ways. The online method, which is recommended to grant access with the serial number, and the offline method, where we will have to request an offline subscription and perform two steps, as we can see right here. To carry out the online subscription, the appliances will need internet access so they can contact our activation server. So perfect, we will select the online option and indicate the serial number we had assigned in our MyUDS, which in this case I have it right here. I will copy it and paste it right here. Perfect. Now we will click on next, and as we have seen, the activation process has been carried on and we have moved on to the security section. In the security section, we will select the security level we want. In this case, we will select standard, and now we are going to define the passwords to access the different UDS sites. First of all, the root console. When we talk about the root console, we mean the access credentials for the machine console. And in this case, I'm going to set a password like UDS, and if I click on the eye icon, I can see the password I set and simply enter it once. On the other hand, we will have the credential for our super user, which in my case I am going to call UDS, and this will be the one who can access the UDS portal, and we are going to give it a password like in my case in UDS. UDS is the same as the super username, and it is not the most recommended password for security, but in the end, since it's an example, I am going to use this password. So once ready, we will click on next. And that's it. Once we have already completed the security section, we will install the certificates. If we have a web certificate, we can specify it, and it must be in PEM format. We can specify the certificate, the key, and the chain of our certificate authority. If you don't have any certificate, leaving it blank will use the self-signed UDS certificate. So since I do not have any certificate, I'm going to leave it blank and click on next. So once the configuration process is complete, we will click on restart, and as we can see, the machine will start restarting. We will access the console, and as we can see, the initial part has changed, meaning the server configuration has been carried out successfully. So we are going to do an access test by typing HTTPS, the server IP, we will click on advanced, and we will now have access to the UDS web portal. Now I'm going to enter the super user credentials. In my case, we set UDS and UDS of password. It is worth noting that I only use the super user credentials because I do not have any other type of user in the database, so we will click on login, and that's it. Now we will be able to access the control panel app here on the right side, and once these steps are done, we can move on to configuring our tunnel. It is recommended that to configure this tunnel, we first have an authenticator created. So to do that, we are going to create a new one. We are going to go to the authentication section, click authenticators, and we will create, for example, an internal database. I am going to name it internal, for example, with the label int, and that's it. I click on save. And now within the authenticator, we will create a new group. In this case, I am going to call it admins, for example. I click OK. And now we will create the users. In this case, the user will be called UDS admin with the administrator role with the password UDS. And we will add them to the administrators group. So once the user is configured, we will click on OK. And once we have the user inside the platform, we can move on to configuring the tunnel appliance. So we will click on Proxmox, and now we will turn on the tunnel appliance. In the same way, our appliance will turn on and will acquire an IP through DHCP. Since I, for example, have a DHCP and an IP has been assigned to me, I'm going to access its web configurator directly through the IP it shows. And in this case, it is the following one. Don't forget the HTTPS. And inside we will specify the language, that in this case English, just like before. Next, next, and next. And in the network section, we can leave it as default as we did before, or we can modify the IP, the mask, the gateway, etc. In this case, we are going to specify an IP address, which will be this one. The mask is fine, so we will leave it as default. And the gateway, in my case, is the following one. In my case, since the DNS server IP is correct, I will leave it as default. Once all fields are verified, we will click on next. And we will click yes, so that it applies all network related changes. And as we can see in the URL, the IP has changed and we no longer have the old one. It has now changed to the new one and we will be accessing the configurator through the new IP. So we will click Advanced and we will be back in the configurator. So just like before, we are going to enter the setup code, which we have right here. We will click on Next and we will select the keyboard layout, in this case Spanish, the time zone, and if we use an NTP server, we can specify it just like the server. We'll click on Next, and when we are on this tab, we must go to the tunnel console. So once in the console, I am going to do a clear so everything looks cleaner, and now we must enter the following command, which is UDS trust, the server IP, and port 443. What this will do is make the channel trust the self-signed certificate that the UDS server has. In my case, since I didn't add any type of certificate and I'm currently using the self-signed UDS certificate, I have to do this process. If you use a certificate not recognized by the channel, the UDS trust process can also be used so that it can recognize the certificate in question. So well, now that the command has been explained, we will hit enter. And as we can see, the certificate named UDS has been added to the list of valid certificates. Furthermore, an entry will be created in the etc host file, so that the file resolution of the certificate is effective. So once this is done, we return to the configurator and we will enter the name of the certificate, which in my case, as we said before, is UDS. We will select the authenticator we created earlier, which is internal, along with the user we also created earlier and their password. Once ready, we will click Next, and when we get to the security section, we must specify a password so that our user can access the tunnel console. So in this case, we will set a password like UDS, and if we click on the little icon, there's no need to repeat it again. We'll click on Next. And just like the server, they also let us specify PEM format certificates for HTML5 connections. But in this case, since I don't have any certificate, I'm going to click Next. And once completed, we will click Reboot and wait for the appliance to restart. And once restarted, we can check that the HTML5 service works by opening a new tab and entering the following: HTTPS, the IP of our channel, with the HTML5 port, which is 10.443. We hit enter, and as we can see, the HTML5 service is working correctly. With this, we now have the UDS Enterprise platform fully available and operational. So we hope you liked this video and that it was very helpful. Thank you very much for watching and best regards.